I've been reading some of the works of Swami Turiyananda again and finding some quite interesting things here today. Just a very short paragraph covers a lot of really interesting ground. Interestingly enough, Swami Turiyananda was in San Francisco around the turn of the century. He was a direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, who started the order of monks that I'm a part of. Anyway, just a little bit of trivia there to kind of bring him out of the clouds for us, make him more like a real person in some sense. He says attachment and aversion are the root of all evil. That's interesting. Okay, it's right up there with the love of money, which empowers aversion and attraction. It's an interesting statement to sit and think about. At the surface, it's like, what does that mean? You know, why does me wanting something and not wanting something else? How is that the root of all evil? And it's a great meditation. He says, one attains knowledge through the grace of the great sages. Yeah, these men and women who have gone before us, who literally dedicated their lives to experimenting and to renouncing and to trying all different things to figure out who they were, what the purpose of life is, what's fulfilling, what's not fulfilling, and the fact that they wrote it down and then that or it got written down. Actually, most of them didn't write it down. Most of it was written down by their students who came to find and learn from them. And it's a very interesting thing because I think, especially in the West and maybe more particular here in the States, this idea of organized religion, institutionalized religion, has really gotten a bad rap. And I think, frankly, it deserves it. Religion doesn't belong in institutions. It belongs in individuals. I really believe that. But because institutions and societies, even like in India, when Buddha came around, he was a Vedantist monk, a reformist, and really confronted the troubles of what had happened when society had taken control of a religion and used it to maintain the status quo and the advantage of a few, namely the Brahmin caste at that time. And then, of course, in the Middle Ages, in our own Western culture, we see the abuse of institutionalized religion. But the folks that have done the work, the practitioners of these spiritual ideals, they were most of the time individuals, who were out in the woods or out in the mountains, out in the desert, doing a ton of thinking, a ton of pondering, really digging deep into the meaning of lives and being listened to or being heard because of the profound changes in their character. I mean, you look at these great luminaries, the life of a Buddha, you read that, you're amazed. The life of Krishna, the life of Jesus, these lives of just gorgeous characters, so much love and so much compassion and so much justice and just a complete lack of racism and distinctions and homophobias and hatreds and whatnot like that, with some exceptions, of course. If we do the work as individuals, we find the answers to these things and we can mitigate our attractions and our aversions. When he says it's the root of all evil, all of the racism going on today is because we've identified ourselves with bodies and skin colors and nationalities. And that's not what we are. We are not a gender. We are not a body. We are not a race. There's a humanity and isness deeper than that takes a lot of work to reach. And it's because of the grace of these great sages that we can not have to redo the work. We can read a book like this one or the Vedas, the books of philosophy, and find out these truths and look at how they did their experiments and decide for ourselves. I think that's one of the important things to understand about spiritual life, is going into it, you don't have to believe ahead of time anything in particular. It's a matter of personal investigation. It's a matter of giving you the tools. At least that's what the Vedanta is to me anyway, just looking at my own personal case, and not that it's the right one for anyone else. But it's just a set of tools to sit down and do the investigation myself, to go in and find if these things are true or not, and to work with what works and to leave out what doesn't. Sri Ramakrishna, one of his famous teachings, he says, the scriptures are like a big fish. He says sometimes you got to chop off the head and chop off the tail and eat the rest. You've got to do some work to separate the sand from the sugar in those things, because over the years things do make it in here that don't belong in here, or times change and there are some surface truths that are not part of the deeper truths that need to be challenged and need to be moved. And so he's saying that then one feels a strong yearning for emancipation from the world. It's an understanding. As you start to understand your nature, you feel the bondage of the world. You feel the bondage of your desires. You realize that it's not me who wants these things. It's a conflagration of mind that is demanding these things. It's a mood of body that's, demanding these things. And you realize that freedom does not mean the freedom to do what you want. It means freedom from want altogether. To be able to be perfectly content as you are, where you are, when you're there. And the tools for developing that kind of tranquility. And the cosmic will makes circumstances favorable to him. The individual is bound. Like a tethered cow, he is free to a certain extent only, not fully. This is something very important, that not everybody is born free as such. The scripture here is teaching that we're born free to a degree. We're tethered to a pole, and we have a 10 or 15 foot rope, and within that 10 or 15 feet we can maneuver and make our decisions. And you're saying, well, how is that true? Well, you don't have control over the resources that you're born into. You don't have control over the level of education that the family has that you're born into. You're not in charge of the culture and the nation and its resources that you're born into. So these are things that are given, kind of like a play of cards. Once you've got your hand of your playing cards, you can play those to win the game as much as you can, but you've got those limited cards to work with there. And he says, but he is emancipated if he utilizes that limited freedom in the proper way. There is a good way to play a bad hand, and you do the best you can. And maybe the game will allow you to switch out 2 or 3 cards to get a better hand. And certainly the scriptures teach that through the grace of these practices, you can change the deck that you're playing with. You can definitely move forward in life. He does not do it, but rather abuses it in various ways. That's the unfortunate reality. We employ our attractions and aversions to bring ourselves pleasure, and thereby make them deeper, and hold on to them and remain unchanged. And racism becomes systematic, becomes enculturated, and people born into that enculturated racism are not even aware of it anymore. I'm amazed by that here this week there's been several reports of people getting caught in overtly racist activities. And the first thing they'll say when confronted about it, I'm not a racist, because they're not lying in that sense, they're not being malicious in that sense. They really just don't have enough self-awareness and enough self-criticism to have even identified it. They've actually lived within a culture and within a system where they could live that way and function that way without ever having been made aware of it. And that's why unfortunately, that's why what we're seeing is happening in the last 24 hours. And we need to change that. One is the protesting, sure, but the deeper way for change is from Gandhi. Be the change that you want to see. Begin doing the work of spiritual life, and it doesn't have to be for a religious purpose. It just has to be for your own betterment, for the reaching of your own ideal, for empowering yourself to become what you dream of being. That's the ideal. Every spiritual ideal is to build that character in you so that you are in control of yourself, that you can make a decision. No, I'm not going to do that. Or yes, I am going to do that. No, I'm not going to be controlled by anger. That you get these choices. You get to make these decisions about yourself. You're not driven into them by passions and by overwhelming desires that blind your reason. Because that's exactly what's happening to these folks that are getting in trouble for these things. Their passions and their reasons have been blinded, and they act out of passion, and then are suffering horribly for it. Of course, they caused a lot of suffering for it too. That's there also. Each man has his own world and sees the same substance in a different way. We each carry that copy of the world within ourselves, and it's the condition of our mind that makes the world what it is for us as our own personal experience. We're all looking at the same world, but experiencing it very differently. And, these techniques within spiritual life are to help level that ground out so that you can see what your assumptions are, so that you can see what your attachments are, you can see what your bondages are, what your aversions are, and you can make informed decisions about them and learn to control them, learn to direct them, to play your hand of cards better for a win, not to get trumped on. Because the sages say that when you find that divine perspective that's based on the nature of what you are, this world becomes a mansion of mirth, great joy, great fun. Realizing the self in all things, one attains to peace eternal. That self in all things, to know that you are everything, to see yourself in everyone. And from that vision is born that golden rule, to do unto others as you would have them do unto you, because you are in fact doing unto yourself by the way you treat the people around you, by the way you treat strangers and friends and family. So that's my encouragement for the day. That's some words from the scriptures from Swami Turiyananda, and they're very apropos in this time. Start the revolution, but start it inside.